All right. Well, I have 3 minutes after the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate your time. I'm Marty Rosendale. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Technology Council and a partner with Newport. This is the live CapitalM ZoomCast. As many of you know, the CapitalM podcast was originally intended to further the conversation in the region around capital markets, define issues, identify solutions, and build consensus to drive change. In recent months, we've pivoted to a live ZoomCast format, and our focus these days is on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, the regional response, and our recovery. Our sponsor today is Amgen. Amgen has been a strong and long-term supporter of life sciences technology and the Maryland Technology Council. As a member of our legislative coalition, they've contributed their time and expertise to support our industries. So I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you to Amgen for their sponsorship and for their ongoing support. The Maryland Technology Council is the industry trade association representing the technology and life science industries throughout Maryland. Together with our members, we are improving the business climate in Maryland and helping companies that save, secure, and improve lives around the globe. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Your microphones are on mute right now. We will be using the Q&A function to ask questions or to take comments as the discussion goes on. You'll find the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Please type and send your questions throughout the discussion. I will be monitoring those questions and able to incorporate them into the discussion as we go. This ZoomCast is being recorded and it will be made available for others to watch or listen to afterwards at the Tech Council website at mdtechcouncil.com. And today, Richard Tabito has joined me. Richard is MTC's Legislative Counsel. Richard, do you have any opening remarks today?
Sure. So for everyone that doesn't know me, I'm an attorney at Schwartz, Metz & Wise, which is a lobbying firm in Annapolis where we represent the Maryland Tech Council. We decided to put together this ZoomCast because we felt it would be interesting for the legislators, particularly the ones that have historically supported the Maryland Tech Council or have either with legislation that they've sponsored in the past or in conversation, for them to know a little bit about what we've done during this COVID-19 crisis. And not so much necessarily in the terms of vaccines or diagnostics or therapeutics, but things that we've done to support each other, to support the industry, things that we think could be replicated for the benefit of other industries, or to actually prepare the state if we were to unfortunately ever go through this again. So on this call, we have Vice Chair of Senate Finance, Brian Feldman. We have the Senate Majority Leader, Nancy King, the House Majority Leader, Eric Luedtke, the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Biotechnology, Senator Katie Hester. We have Delegate Nick Charles from the House Health and Government Operations Committee. We have Delegate Lily Chi from the House Economic Matters Committee. We have Senator Steve Hershey from the Senate Finance Committee. So we have a good group of folks that, like I said, have historically expressed interest in our industry, and we thought it would be good for them to learn about a little bit of what we've done, potentially come up with some ideas that could be legislated for next year for broader applicability. So we thank everyone for joining, and Marty, I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you, Richard. So, senators and delegates, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it. I know you've been very busy, and I'm glad you could take some time to talk with us this afternoon. I know you're familiar with what the Tech Council does, so I don't want to get into a discussion of what we do during normal times, but these have not been normal times. So I kind of wanted to give you a quick briefing on some of the activities that have taken place over the last few months, and then get your thoughts and opinions. So like everyone else, we've pivoted to a virtual environment. The Tech Council staff are for the most part working from home, and we've had to adapt to the technology, but I think that adaptation has gone pretty well for the organization. We are planning to move back as the state begins to reopen, but because it has worked so well for us, we're not in a big hurry to do that. But in the meantime, when the pandemic first began, we noticed that here in Maryland, Senator Feldman, as you and I were discussing before this ZoomCast began, there's just so many things are happening. I mean, Maryland is the epicenter of the response to COVID-19 with the NIH, the FDA, the amazing industry participants that we have here. And we saw that many of our companies, our members, were pivoting to respond to COVID-19. So we created the COVID Coalition, and the COVID Coalition is made up of the companies in Maryland that are producing diagnostics, therapeutics, vaccines, or supporting those industries. Today, we have over 40 companies that are a member of that coalition, and we've managed to facilitate 32 connections, if you will. These range from accessing personal protective equipment to transportation to other things that these companies needed as we go forward. So it's been an amazing response here in Maryland to the pandemic. In addition, on the technology side of our organization, one of the challenges that we saw early on was with the stimulus packages coming from the state, from the federal government, from some of the local municipalities, it was getting confusing. And so some of our tech companies got together and created a relief wizard. And through this application, you can go on your computer, answer a handful of questions, and it will tell you which of these stimulus packages your company qualifies for and direct you to the source for those stimulus packages. In addition, more recently, you may have seen the press release, because we've seen a number of companies that are struggling with the recession. If you were looking to raise money early on, and your investors began to become more cautious, some of them stopped investing at all, at least for a little while, and you needed to raise capital, it puts you into a bad situation almost immediately. Other companies are telling us that because of challenges to their supply chain or their pipeline, they're going to be having problems in 3, 4, 5 weeks from now. So we created the Business Continuity Task Force. We're leveraging the amazing group, 130 mentors that we've developed through our venture mentoring service. Many of them have led companies through similar situations. And so we've created an opportunity to match these mentors up with the companies that are battling with these challenges to help them navigate the process going forward. And then the final thing that I'll put out there is, in addition to the COVID Coalition, which is a coalition of industry participants, the University System of Maryland created a COVID task force. And we connected the two together, and out of that connection we've come up with an idea for a Pandemic Preparedness Institute. The idea here is to create an institute that helps prepare us for future situations like this, maybe even runs exercises, preparedness exercises like you might see in disaster recovery and other areas. And so this collaboration, if you will, between university and industry looks like it may take off and help us not only respond to this current pandemic and situation, but prepare for and be in a better position for future pandemics. So that's kind of a rundown of the activities that we've been involved with for the last few months. I was wondering if maybe each of you could take 2 to 3 minutes, tell us about the things that are priorities to you. I know that we had to end the general session early, but I know that doesn't mean that the work stopped for you. I know that you've all been working very hard supporting the state and our industries through this. And so we'd like to hear from you, what that's been like. I'm also curious, as you're telling us what your priorities are, you, like everybody else, the entire state legislature has had to pivot to a virtual environment. And so I'm curious about what that transition was like. So Senator Feldman, maybe if you'd like to start.
Yeah, well, thanks, Marty. First of all, it's great to be here. I think each and every year for many years, I've been in front of the Tech Council, either before or after session. And we have a kind of a long relationship dating back to Senator King and I worked many, many years ago during our first term on the biotechnology investment tax credit. And we worked with the Tech Council. And since that time, I think we've had a great relationship. Let me again, I'm on the Senate Finance Committee. I serve as the vice chair. Senator Hershey's on that committee, and we deal with a lot of the healthcare issues, energy policy, economic development topics. and I'm also the Senate representative on the Governor's Economic Development Commission. So one thing that I think that, you know, from a regional standpoint, that you talk about a priority or focus, you know, I think that moving forward, we continue to have to diversify our private sector economic portfolio. I think that is hugely important. That's why we made a big play to keep Marriott headquarters in Montgomery. That's why we made a play for Amazon. But when you transition, you pivot to, again, away from too much dependence on the federal government at a time when they're running big deficits, they could downsize the federal workforce. I think we need to look at the life sciences and cybersecurity and all that kind of stuff. I think that's important. And when you see the 270 corridor of Maryland and Novavax and companies that are part of the Tech Council, QIAGEN, playing such a central part of looking for a vaccine and testing and all the rest, I think it shows the upside economic potential for our state. And so on that front, I did collaborate with Delegate Chi, who I'm glad is on this call, who used to be one of our economic development gurus in Montgomery County under Ike Leggett. And we cross-filed several bills this year specifically on the topic of how do we leverage what we have here and do it even a little bit better, putting more tools in the toolbox for some of our small tech firms. And so I might let Lily talk about some of them, but just we had put in a bill that passed dealing with a matching program so that if you're a small tech company and you get a SBIR grant from the federal government, the state of Maryland would match that. And we were able to get that through this year through the House and Senate. Unfortunately, to our surprise, the governor vetoed that bill. So one of the things we need to go back and do is override some of the vetoes. That one kind of surprised us. I'll give Delegate Luedtke some credit too, because this bill had to go through the Ways and Means Committee as well. So that matching SBIR program was a good thing. We did actually pass another bill that would provide some of those folks, those small companies, with technical assistance with the help of the state of Maryland. Again, companies that are trying to get SBIR grants, again, I think important. And then we also had one bill that the governor put in, a similar bill dealing with energy innovation. Another kind of upside potential for our state in the private sector is clean energy. I sponsored last year the Clean Energy Jobs Act. That's a good thing, but we have a lot of good stuff going on at the University of Maryland in terms of clean energy technology. And so we had a piece of legislation that I think we're going to have to bring back, and the governor had a piece of legislation. I think these are the kinds of things, whether it's clean energy technology, whether it's biotech, cybersecurity, that we continue to have to keep a focus on as we diversify away from kind of too much dependence on federal largesse and federal jobs. And so, and then finally, I just mentioned we've done a lot of good things on healthcare in terms of bringing healthcare costs down in Maryland with big state reinsurance program that, again, taking a lead in the nation. We're trying to do some other things on pharmaceutical drug pricing, which I know the Tech Council is very interested in. So maybe I'll stop there. But again, my main theme here is we need to diversify our private sector economic portfolio. We have tremendous opportunities in biotech, cyber, and clean energy in particular. And I think that the future is bright. And so again, I'll thank you, Marty, for that opportunity.
Thank you. Delegate Luedtke.
Thank you very much, Marty, for having me, and honored to be with so many great legislators. So in addition to serving as majority leader in the House of Delegates, I'm the chair of the Revenue Subcommittee, as Brian mentioned, on Ways and Means, and I have a lot of involvement with particularly tax climate issues. But I want to mention for a lot of the folks that are watching who may be less familiar with the legislature, legislating is a team sport, and we work very much hand in hand in the House on different committees. So Delegate Chi, Delegate Charles are on different committees. We work closely together on a range of issues, right? I have taxes. Delegate Chi's got business regulation. Delegate Charles sits on the Insurance and Pharmaceutical Subcommittee. All of these are important to tech businesses, and you should feel free to come to any of us with concerns or ideas or proposals for new bills. Marty, in terms of what's on my mind, just to add a little bit to what the senator said, because I agree with everything he said in terms of diversifying the economy, particularly when we know we're going to be experiencing a significant economic shock over the next couple of years, there's a couple things that are on my mind. One, in sort of the larger economic sense, is that what we experienced 10 years ago with the Great Recession was an elongated recession. And part of the reason for that was that the government revenues tend to lag a little bit behind where the economy is. So businesses right now, a lot of them are taking a real serious hit, but our revenues are still doing okay for the time being. They're going to get worse over the next couple years. And during the Great Recession, just as businesses, as the private sector was starting to recover, states started engaging in massive layoffs and cuts to salaries and things like that. And that actually made the recession last longer. So, you know, a real concern for all of us in the legislature, for the governor, and for governors and legislatures across the country, is that Congress be sure to include support for states in the next stimulus. It's absolutely vital for us pulling ourselves out of this recession. In sort of the more Maryland-focused area, I'm particularly, as chair of the Revenue Subcommittee, engaged in conversations about tax and tax climate. You know, there are times where the state has done a very good job developing tax credits, tax incentives that have helped expand industry in Maryland. And Senator Feldman, Senator King worked, for example, on the biotech credit, which has been a boon, a tremendous boon to the state. We have some other credits that haven't worked as well, and we haven't necessarily done a good job of engaging in the type of cost-benefit analysis that the private sector often engages in. But that's something that, as chair of that subcommittee, I'm really interested in. And in order to do that job effectively, we need your feedback. We need the private sector to come to us and say, here's what's working, here's what's not, here's how you can make the program better. And I'll give you an example that was just a question asked about it in the Q&A. I hope I'm not jumping the gun. Senator Hershey had introduced a bill this year having to do with data centers. Many of our neighboring states have created tax incentives for the development of data centers, which is one reason, just one reason, but one reason why Virginia is the data center capital of the world. Virginia's largely built out now in terms of data centers. Maryland has some real opportunity there. So, you know, finding those credits that target industries that we need to develop, passing them, partnering with the public sector and private sector to help those industries develop, that's essential work. And so, you know, Senator Hershey should be commended for taking the lead on that, but folks in the private sector should also be commended for coming to legislators and saying, you know, here's what we need to grow the next generation of tech businesses in Maryland.
Thank you. Senator King.
Hey, Marty, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this phone call today. I appreciate it. Let me just start by saying that how impressed I've been with the Tech Council since this whole thing started. I've gotten a couple different briefings from the council, and the fact that so many businesses helped each other through this thing and kind of pulled each other up. Even people that were competitors were able to help each other to get through this. And that, I don't think that can be duplicated anywhere. So I applaud the Tech Council for helping to put that together and helping all of our businesses. As we said, the council, or the session, ended 20 days early this year. And it was very weird at the end because we were the only ones there. And no public, no lobbyists, and it was a very weird ending for us. But one thing that we have come up with that you don't deal with as much as we do is that everything we do, all of our Zoom calls, everything has to be public. So not only do we have to set up a call, but we have to set it up so that the public can be a part of it and hear what we're saying and doing. And that's a big concern about us getting back together, and what we do when it's time for session is how do we do it, and how do we have the public be a part of that. So I've been on this COVID work task force since session ended every week, and listening to all the briefings from the health department and education, and all of us trying to figure out what we do to move forward. And it's, you know, it's anybody's guess yet, because we just don't know when this is all going to end and how we can do a session coming up. So all of that has been interesting conversation and will continue to be so. And I think our focus has to be on recovery of our businesses and what we need to do, what kind of legislation we need to help them out. I think the governor's in place to do that, and I think that we need to be in place to maybe change some things around, change some tax credits, put some new ones in. I think we're going to be very open to some good ideas for how we move forward.
Thank you. Delegate Charles.
Hey, thanks, Marty. Appreciate you guys for actually pulling this together. And Rich, thanks for the invite. As you guys know, I've definitely been truly supportive of what you guys are doing with the Maryland Tech Council. I wish we could truly gather a lot of what you are doing and bring a lot to Prince George's County as well. As you know, that's been a huge focus of mine, especially with us having the Capital Region Health Center through University of Maryland that being built up and capitalizing on the biotech credits, these tax credits, and utilizing those to try to help diversify, as Senator Feldman said, diversify the economy within Prince George's County. That's something I'm truly interested in. And as I stated to you guys before, Marty, we talked in some detail a little bit as well, as far as just you guys letting us know so we can put the right types of pieces of legislation in to address the different types of credits that may be beneficial, because there is a plethora of businesses that fall within the Tech Council. You got biotech, you have some pharmaceutical businesses, you have regular technology businesses, defense contracting firms. It's so diverse that we really can be in a position to help you guys out if you really help us lay that foundation, put the right pieces of legislation in for you. But I'm interested to see what you guys can help us come up with. You got a very great group of people on this call right now that are in some key positions to really make these things happen. So I'm looking forward to finding out a little more.
Great, thank you. And Senator Hershey, I don't know if you heard, but one of our first comments this morning was thanking you for your leadership in passing SB 397.
Right. Thank you. Very familiar with that. And I want to shout out to Delegate Luedtke as well, too, for helping us get that through on the House side. But, again, I see, Marty, I appreciate you putting this on, but I see things very differently as a representative from rural counties. We certainly don't have the abundance of businesses that you might see in other counties of the state, but we're starting to see a number of startups, a number of incubators at the smaller scale, trying to get in positions where they can maybe grow to be bigger. And the data center bill that we put through was certainly something that is very helpful, but ironically came from Kent County, a county over here where they were trying to entice a smaller scale data center to come into that area and help with one of the biggest issues that we have, and that's the connectivity between in this area. Rural broadband is a big concern that we have in trying to get that deployed to more areas within the areas that I represent. In fact, I have a call just after this with Chairwoman Kelly to try to discuss some ideas that we might be able to look forward with that. So certainly plays a big role, a little bit different perspective over here on the rural areas, but we definitely need to do some of the things that we've done and some of the great ideas that we've had in the last legislative session to kind of push technology a little bit further.
Great, thank you. Delegate Shi.
Didn't know it was my turn already. Hi, Marty. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Richard, for having me and for pulling together this great group of bright minds. I agree, innovation economy should be a conversation that all of us should subscribe to and should be in touch with each other regularly, because it is the future, and it's much more than just Montgomery County. So I want to just start by sharing with you a small piece of exciting news that just happened last night. I have been appointed to the chair of Montgomery County Delegation's Economic Development Committee. So I really look forward to helping to drive our delegation's conversation and local policies in conjunction with the state policies on economic development front. And thank you, Marty. I want to, first of all, say that I have been a friend and a follower of Maryland Tech Council's work for many years, and I appreciate your leadership on many fronts. One example was that relief wizard that Marty mentioned earlier, which I have pushed out in my newsletter many times because it was confusing and was frustrating for a lot of businesses, tech or not, to see which one they qualify, which one is what deadline, how much they can get and all of that. So it was super helpful. It was a great tool, and thank you. That's the kind of thing you should keep doing. It's very popular, and get your name out too. So the two bills my senator mentioned, Senator Feldman was a great partner on everything I do related to innovation economy. We were lucky with the leadership of our majority leader, Delegate Luedtke, who was actively pushing those two small business friendly bills that also happen to be innovation entrepreneurship friendly bills. The SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Technical Assistance Bill, which passed and survived the governor's veto pen. So I'm looking forward to collaborating with TEDCO. And thank you, Marty, for your support along the way and great advice for small businesses under 50 employees who want to get the next round of SBIR fund or just to get on the SBIR schedule. And then the one that my senator mentioned, the SBIR matching grant, unfortunately, this time we finally got it past both chambers, but it got vetoed. You know, the irony is this is exactly the kind of bill we need, not only for the amount of money we asked, which is very, very moderate, like a 1.3 million. We should have put $100 million on a bill like this. And here's why. Governor Deval Patrick of Massachusetts, over a decade ago, when he was governor, committed to making Massachusetts the national #1 leader on biotechnology. And what he did was $1 billion commitment. That was what he said. What he actually did was a little short of $1 billion, right? But even after a few $100 million, you saw several, like triple times private investment because that dramatically boosts private sector confidence. And now who could dispute a decade later that Maryland is chasing Massachusetts to try to get back in the game as a national leader? It matters what we try to invest in or what we say we're going to do and then do it, right? So I really think this is a time to double down on our investments, not to shy away and use excuse like, oh, you know, here's $1 million we can save. You're going to kick yourself 10 years down the road, maybe not even 10 years. You know, these are the great jobs that our people deserve and need close to home. So I'm going to reintroduce this bill and I'm going to put it out there. I hope we continue to get bipartisan strong support as we did the first time. And the thing I am concerned about most that keeps me up at night is when I look at how this pandemic played out and the utter lack of national leadership on this issue, right? I'm saying, how can we as a state with unbelievably blessed assets in public health and health research leverage all of our public and private and academic institutions to drive national conversation, to not only develop an immediate coordinated national response beyond the regions like Western regions, Eastern regions, but also to make sure we as a state come out strong on innovation economy, whether it's diagnostic tools, whether it's vaccines, whether it's treatment, whatever it is, the whole gamut, even biomanufacturing, right? So these are the things that I'm thinking of. And I'm so glad for the #3 point that you made, which is the Institute for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, because I just learned about it yesterday from my conversation with Tom Sadowski, the University System of Maryland, and they are very much looking forward to working with you on this. So how can we introduce maybe a bill that we tried to introduce? I partnered with my senator again on this tech partnership, you know, Maryland Technology Partnership, and put that under the umbrella of that to add some state support for that. You know, that could be a very concrete project that we could partner on. So I'm just, you know, thinking out loud, how can we be an enabler of collaboration and enabler of innovation? And sometimes we also need to get out of the way as well, right? So again, I join my colleagues in asking you to please give us feedback as we struggle with these things and think about how we can be most helpful. So thank you very much for having me again.
Very good, thank you. And Senator Hester, I know we can't see you, but I believe you're online. microphone is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to start by apologizing for the background noise. I've got two kids who are running around enjoying being out of school. But thank you so much for hosting this. And I want to congratulate you all on, first of all, the Relief Wizard, which has gotten really great feedback from small businesses in my district. And then secondly, for all the work that you're doing on the health side. I mean, these are really, they are scary times. And knowing that we have the great resources that we do in Maryland stepping up to do things like this COVID coalition is really reassuring. You asked, of course, I agree with everything the other legislators have said. You've got assembled a really strong team here on this call. In terms of, my three priorities, it's hard to pick, but as, co-chair of the Joint Committee on Cyber, IT, and Biotech, I think one of the things that I'm really looking forward to looking at over the summer with my co-chair, Delegate Jackson, is updating our aging IT infrastructure. I mean, we've heard, hold on one second. What we've heard around the unemployment issues, I mean, I've had over 180 people contact my office not being able to get IT and not being able to get unemployment benefits. And while we can all point fingers, the reality is that our state as a whole has an aging IT infrastructure, and that, regardless of what systems we're running, if they're on a mainframe in the department of an agency, it's going to be hard to scale up and scale down very quickly. So working with DeWitt and with the other members of the Joint Committee, I think we really need to look at how we update our IT infrastructure, across all the state agencies, and look at ways to tap into the grants that are available at the federal level, 90/10, to get that done. The second thing on workforce development and cyber, I remember talking last year at this time about that, and I was very pleased to introduce Senate Bill 1049 this year, which would have created a grant program for cybersecurity companies and organizations to come together with community colleges and universities to really have a demand-led pipeline for talent coming into the industry. We obviously have a great industry. There's tons going on in Maryland, but really making sure that we connect and are fast enough at connecting the kids, in college, in community college, with the jobs that are available, so that we make sure that we fill that talent pipeline is both critical for our economy, but also, critical for, the state and the local people who hire and want to be able to protect, their assets. The third thing, which Senator Feldman also serves on, is this bipartisan caucus for small business jobs. And this is a newly formed kind of informal caucus. We've been working together for about 18 months. And we had a bunch of wins this session, including something that Senator Gazzoni worked and sponsored, which was Senate Bill 523, which actually changes the way pass-through entities are taxed at the state level in order to make them eligible for the SALT deduction without the individual $10,000 cap. So for any small businesses listening right now, that's really important for you to ask your accountant about. And then looking forward, the Senate Small Business Bipartisan Working Group, we've really been focused on advocating, both at the federal level, but also at the state level, to make sure that small businesses, which make up a majority of Maryland's economy, are taken care of. And as we start to, reopen and look longer term, one of the things that I in particular am interested in is, what are the most sustainable and creative ideas that we can use over the next to support these small businesses as they recover from the economic downturn over the next 6 to 36 months, and what does that look like? So with that, I'll stop there and just really want to thank you guys for hosting this, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. So we have a number of comments and questions that have come in, but I'm going to exercise the moderator's prerogative and ask a question of my own first. So Delegate G and Senator Feldman, you both mentioned the Maryland Small Business Innovation Research Technical Assistance Bill, and that's a bill that passed that I particularly like. I like it because it will help companies prepare for the capital markets. And one of the things that we've found when we started this podcast almost 2 years ago, we were focused on those capital markets and looking at what are the issues that we face here in Maryland. And a lot of it really has to do with the leadership teams and their preparedness for those markets. And a bill like this provides support to help prepare companies for those capital markets. Is there an opportunity to do more like this? Is there an opportunity to create more legislation to provide more support like this that will help our companies prepare to raise capital in the international capital market rather than trying to bring the investors here, prepare our companies to go out and raise money internationally?
Lily,
Oh, okay.
why don't you let Lily take the lead there first?
All right, I'll take a stab at this. The initial bill, which was passed, was based on the Department of Commerce recommendation after it did a comprehensive study of what the needs are for our early stage research companies. And we thought it was a fiscally modest bill that would have a good chance of passing. But I agree with Marty, especially right now, a lot of businesses need some hand-holding and pointing them to the right direction. We have a lot of businesses that have been swimming in this space of depending on federal grants. And they could also use some help for the next stage, which is leveraging private capital. And interestingly, in the biotech sector, just about 2 or 3 years ago, we saw the industry turning a corner, being able to raise tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars from the private capital. But those are also still a few shiny examples that are sort of exceptions. Most companies are still early stage and need a lot of technical assistance. So I am really interested in looking at expanding that bill and build on that one in collaboration with TEDCO to see what else we can do without putting up too many restrictions and barriers, like what you need to do in order to qualify for certain things, But again, I welcome examples, and I think this is the time to bring in private investors into the conversations, especially for those initially successful businesses that are venture ready, that are commercially viable, venture ready, have been able to secure SBIR grants. What's next for them is very important. So I'm really looking forward to your ideas and input as well in that regard.
And Marty, the only thing I would add is, look, we can borrow some best practices from some other states. Now, the matching program was a program that we modeled after like 12 or 13 other states have similar programs. And so we're looking for ideas, and you guys have sister organizations all over the country, whether it's the Massachusetts Tech Council or the ones in California, the Northern Virginia Tech Council. I mean, we kind of, I think, can take a look at what other states are doing. I'll take it, Van, I see one of the questions had to do with the matching grant program. Question was what are the chances of us going back and overriding the governor's veto of that bill? Delegate Chi mentioned she's going to reintroduce that bill. I'm hoping she doesn't have to reintroduce the bill. We would, if we could just override the veto of the bill, there won't be any need to reintroduce the bill. And finally, all these, most of these bills come through the Finance Committee. If we can get Senator Hershey on board, anything is possible, Marty. He's usually, and when I'm trying to pitch my colleagues, if I got Hershey, we're in good shape. But he tends to be the guy that's a problem in this space. But on these bills, he was good.
So, Senator Hershey, you want to respond to that?
Respond to the jabbing of Senator Feldman. I would spend a lot of time doing that, but no, Brian's correct. There was a lot of good ideas that came through, and I won't really speak specifically to any of the governor's vetoes at this point in time, but I do know that we are, as a caucus, evaluating many of them, and I think we'll probably end up being supportive of some of the efforts that we put through as a legislature, and hopefully this is one of them.
And again, I'll just make a plug, the Feldman Chi bill in particular, make sure that the Republican senators lay off of that one. That was a good bill, shouldn't have been a veto.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We'll take a look at those. Yeah.
Very good. So I think every one of you in your opening comments mentioned technology. And we have a couple of questions that have come up in that space. So with respect to data centers and the fact that we are, we are in this digital transformation, frankly, throughout the world, is there any consideration for additional policies that may support that digital build out, if you will?
I could add real quick. I've talked to a number of people after the bill was passed, 397 was passed. And frankly, I've heard that the bill as we passed it in the Maryland General Assembly was very robust. And actually, some of who we were trying to compete against with that legislation was Loudoun County and what they were doing in Virginia. I've heard kind of off the record that the economic development officials down there are saying that Maryland's bill really kind of put us a step ahead of what the incentives were that they were providing. And the fact that they are actually reaching capacity over in Loudoun County with the number of facilities that are out there. So we may have really kind of moved to the top of the states that are looking to attract data centers. Obviously, a lot has to do when siting a data center is climate. You're not going to go into areas that are too warm, where obviously cooling is such a major factor in building these and one of the largest expenses in running them. So Maryland is really positioned kind of well, which is good for us. But I don't know that we're going to necessarily need anything else. I mean, we'll wait to hear the bill goes into effect in what, 5 days now. So, but the information I've heard from the very beginning is that we did an awful lot with that bill. We have it in the right position to really start attracting some users.
I think Senator Hershey's right there. I think, though, that the data center conversation is going to be part of a larger conversation that is already starting regarding broadband infrastructure generally and infrastructure generally. COVID, I think, has demonstrated to everyone the importance of access for business, for people working at home, and we're going to see over the long term a lot more people working at home, and for kids that are trying to go to school remotely. Senator Hershey mentioned the rural broadband issue, which is a huge part of this, and that's a lot of that is an infrastructure issue, in particular a last mile infrastructure issue. But there's to the extent that we're building more data centers, there's also going to be incentive to build more of the infrastructure that provides the access in the first place. In addition to the rural infrastructure problem, we have an urban infrastructure problem where in a lot of places in the state, folks have trunk lines going the street in front of their house and nothing coming up to their house. And then people that just can't afford access, which becomes a real economics issue. I mean, if you're trying to get a small business off the ground and you can't afford high-speed internet, you're in serious trouble. So on our side, at least in the House, I'm sure in the Senate, there's some senators thinking about it too. A lot of us are starting to have in-depth conversations about those larger internet access issues, which data centers, I think, are going to be a key part of.
Hey, Marty, as far as this time of the year, this is kind of the time of year that we really start putting together our legislation that we want to do in January. So if you've got any good ideas, the sooner you pass them along to us, the sooner we can start getting things down on paper and getting our ideas put together.
Very good, thank you. Anybody else? So, Delegate Charles, if I may, talking about Prince George's County, there's been a lot of good things happening in Prince George's County of late. The CapitalM project, you kind of mentioned the CapitalM project. What do you see? How do we make sure that we're all inclusive? So as we're looking at this legislation, as we're looking to build the infrastructure, technology, life sciences, how do we ensure that we're inclusive?
Well, it goes back to what I talked to you about earlier, is making sure that we get everybody to the table with the Prince George's County EDC. Also get you guys at the table with the county executive. That's where the conversation has to start. That CapitalM project, like I told you before, I thought that would be an amazing opportunity for you guys to capitalize off of the new hospital that's coming into Prince George's County. By it being a teaching hospital as well, it'll put you guys in a position to maximize the use of a lot of the businesses that fall under the Maryland Tech Council. It all starts back with, you know, let's all sit down. And I don't think we've yet to do that, you know, actually get everybody to the table with the EDC. I know you brought up one company, Ironbow. We discussed those guys and what they could bring, but I believe they were more of a defense contractor firm, which I think is best suited, especially we also have Andrews Air Force Base within Prince George's County. But to capitalize off of the hospital and the medical space, you know, going back to the discussion we have about wet labs possibly coming and seeing if that's something that we could produce within the area, in addition to trying to bring some of these other companies, because I can't remember the total amount that you have, but I knew it was a significant amount of companies that fell within the Tech Council. So let's just get back to the drawing table and sit everybody down so we can really have a discussion. And I know, and figuring out how we can leverage a lot of these tax credits as well that the state has, leveraging what the county has as tax credits as well, because it may be mutually beneficial for all parties.
Okay, thank you. And we are, so I don't know if you know Vinard Wright from Ironbow, but we've been working with Vinard and he's volunteered to help coordinate this discussion in Prince George's County with the Economic Development Organization and others. So we are moving forward with all of that.
Okay. That's good. It's good to hear.
Great, thank you. So Senator Feldman, a couple years ago in a meeting, you said something that has stuck with me. You said, the statement was, I believe, something along the lines of not everything can be legislated. And I'm curious, you know, when I think about that statement, how can you help us help you with the legislation? In conversations I've had with Delegate Chi, you know, I've told her that I don't typically think in terms of legislation, and so sometimes it's difficult for me to realize that, you know, hey, maybe I need to talk with you about this topic. Is there a way that, you know, we've got 78 participants on this call today. Can you help us understand what's the best way? How do we interact best with you to make sure that we have the right conversations?
Well, Marty, I think, you know, for those of us in politics, I do think ultimately it's about, you know, relationships. Now, I'm sitting here listening and I'm getting texts from, I think, 77 of your participants, because they all have my cell number. So I think technology has made it a lot easier to communicate and connect with us. And so for all the changes and everything, the reality is, you know, a lot of ways the pandemic hasn't altered how we interact with folks who want to weigh in on particular subjects. But I would start with the fact that you need good organizations, advocacy organizations, who in turn have networks and relationships with folks in public policy, including some of the key players on the call today. I mean, I really think that's continues, pandemic or no pandemic. I think that ultimately is the key to success with any legislative body. And I appreciate that I said something that you would quote from a couple of years ago that makes me feel good. But no, I really do think that. I think that the better you know folks, and Maryland's not a big state. I will say this, I have some friends in California legislature, or, I mean, this is a small state, and it's not that hard to get to know some of the key players, some of whom you have on this call. And I would encourage folks to do that, because particularly in the DC region, I still think that for the most part, people are obsessed about Capitol Hill. And the reality is, more now than ever, nothing happens on Capitol Hill. I hope Delegate Luedtke's right. At least give us some relief at the state level on the budget. But for the most part, they are punting the ball on every major issue. Most of the action in the United States of America right now is in our state capitals, including Annapolis. And so for those of you who spend a lot of time talking to our federal delegation, and I like those guys, or at least most of those guys, that time is much better spent getting to know Delegate Luedtke, Chi, Hershey, King, et cetera, because most of the action impacting the daily lives and the economy of our state is happening right here in Annapolis. So I know that's a long-winded nothing burger answer. That's how I see it.
Anybody else want to respond?
Yeah, let me chime in, Marty. I have been struggling, since I'm a relatively new legislator. There were a lot of things I thought I really can't do as a legislator. So I have been struggling with balancing the legislative role of being helpful without being harmful inadvertently. And I think that's probably a perpetual dilemma of all the legislators. Sometimes we introduce things that we thought would be helpful, may end up hurting people inadvertently. So I think the number one rule that I remind myself every day is do no harm. For a lot of businesses, especially those that are not in the innovation business, that are in the transaction-based businesses, not having government constantly telling them what they can or cannot do is probably a great blessing for them, right? So they can compete freely in the market. And when they're in trouble, that's when we need to step in, like during a pandemic and some crises happening, technical assistance and all of that. But for innovation businesses, it's a completely different line of business. It's capital intensive and it's patent driven. It needs a lot of infusion of government help at the early stage. And so I think those are the things we should do to prop up those companies, because they need help at early stage. And then they can really thrive and create fabulous jobs that become the next MediMu or whatever. So, I think it's a constant balance in everything we do in terms of legislative ideas. Because last time when you hosted a call, I remember Dr. Singh made a very important comment and said, more legislation could mean more restrictions, right, for companies. So she was a little, concerned about that. So I just want to, remind myself and share with my colleagues that this is what we all struggle with, I think.
Marty, let me just add one coda to what Senator Feldman was saying, and I agree with both Delegate Xi and Senator Feldman. And the senator's absolutely right. The state houses are where the policy-making action is happening right now. But the thing to bear in mind, in addition to what the senator said about the state houses, is that we have a citizen legislature in Maryland, right? None of us is a professional politician in the sense that, somebody on Capitol Hill might be. We all have jobs and careers that we come from. And for a lot of us, that's not business and that's not the tech industry, right? So I'm an educator. I taught middle school before I got elected, and I teach at the college level now, but I've never run a business. So for me to effectively make policy and to understand how the decisions I make are going to affect people on the ground, I absolutely need the Tech Council and its members to come to me and say, hey, here, this is a problem. Or if you did this incentive, it would be really helpful. You have to think about it in terms of educating, right? You have to educate us about what's going on in your industries and what we can do to help, because I guarantee you, there is not a single one of the 188 members of the General Assembly that doesn't want to help grow industry in Maryland. Our constituents need jobs, right? So we need to hear from you. And that's an absolutely essential part of the process.
Hey, Marty.
Yes.
Going back to what Lily said, we've had this conversation over and over and over in the last few years. It is just so critically important for the members of the Tech Council to build relationships with people, with the delegates and the senators. They can get to know their own person, and it's a quick phone call when there's an issue that, we come up with a lot of brilliant ideas in the legislature. And what might work in Montgomery County or Prince George's County doesn't work on the Eastern Shore or Western Maryland, and various different places across the state. So we really need to hear from your members how it will affect them, so that we don't make those mistakes and pass something that actually does hurt business.
And Marty, one other thing is a lot of what we do in terms of helping out have nothing to do with legislation. Ask my colleagues about what we've been doing since we adjourned. It's been dealing with unemployment insurance claims. It's been trying to help businesses navigate the minefield between the federal programs, the state programs, and even the county programs that are helping to assist businesses. So our offices play a major role in helping on that front that has nothing to do with legislation. So that's been most of our time since March on that front.
And I just wanted to jump in, Marty, and say, say me too. I'm not sure I'm going to give everybody on this phone call my cell phone number, but I did put my email address in the chat box along with the bill number for the workforce development. We're going to be talking about that in middle of next month, and would love to have some industry weigh in. Once again, it's really an industry development package. It doesn't have to require legislation, just requires some resources. So please, my office door is always open, and if you email me, I might give you my cell phone number.
I think all of you, your contact information is on the internet, and if anybody on this call or any of our members wants our assistance getting your contact information, they can contact us as well. So we can certainly help with that process. And I hope everybody listening heard the message that we all need to be involved. Your message needs to be heard. We need to get involved. We need to stay involved in order to work with our legislators and make a difference. We are at the top of the hour. This conversation, I feel like it could go on for much, much longer. I know that we didn't get too heavily into the life sciences in the conversation, but I know many of the issues and concerns there are similar on both technology and life sciences, particularly when it comes to workforce issues and whatnot. I will say again, what this state and everyone in this state has been doing, it has been amazing. The collaboration and effort has been phenomenal. I know that we don't see it, but I know every one of you has been working diligently behind the scenes to help the state, to help industry. It's greatly appreciated. I think when we get to the other end of this, we're going to see a huge number of heroes that need to be celebrated for helping everybody get through this pandemic. And on the life sciences side, as I mentioned, the companies that we have working on the diagnostics, the vaccines, the therapeutics is amazing. Are there any final comments that any of you would like to make before we conclude this afternoon?
Thanks for having us, Marty. How about that?
My pleasure.
Ditto.
Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you all again. I know your time is precious. I know you're working hard to make sure that we all get through this pandemic well. I want to thank our sponsor, Amgen, one more time for helping make this possible. I definitely want to thank all of the 78, 80 participants that listened in and participated with questions and comments today. I apologize that we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but the time just wouldn't allow. So again, thank you all for your time. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your service. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.